It began with a sound so faint it might have been mistaken for rain. A shuffle across the porch followed by the metallic click of a door handle, then silence. At 2:43 a.m., the Ring camera light flickered once, reflected in the glass of a vacation rental perched above the Oregon coast. Inside, a single lamp still glowed in the living room. A half-drunk glass of wine sat beside a folded phone charger. And in the kitchen, her purse, her shoes, her rental car keys all untouched. The next morning, the host arrived to change the linens. The bed was unmade. The window was open. But the guest, Emily Hart, was gone. No signs of a struggle. No footprints in the sand outside. Only that motion-triggered recording exactly 7 seconds long. In it, a shadow crossed the porch, paused, and then, barely visible in the grainy night vision, a hand reached toward the camera. The screen cut to black. For 48 hours, detectives combed the property, certain she'd wandered off toward the cliffs. Then on the third night, the Ring app sent an automated alert to the host's phone. New device connected to your account. The location tag didn't say Oregon. It said Los Angeles. That was 12 miles away. And from that moment, what began as a missing person report became a countdown. A race through timestamps, signal pings, and the one camera that refused to forget what it saw. Before the porch light flickered, before her name became a search headline, Emily Hart had been just another traveler chasing silence. She was 31, a digital marketing consultant from Denver, known among friends for her calm composure, the kind of woman who never seemed rushed, never seemed out of control. But beneath that stillness lived a pulse of exhaustion. In the months before Oregon, she had worked 90-hour weeks on a contract that ended badly, an unpaid invoice, a corporate fight over creative rights. When it was over, she told her sister she needed to disappear for a weekend, just enough to reset, not enough to worry anyone. She booked an Airbnb cabin on the Oregon coast, a converted fisherman's cottage perched on a hill above Cannon Beach. The photos showed driftwood furniture, a view of the Pacific, and a glowing fireplace. The host, Lydia Reeve, had a perfect 5-star rating and a bio that read, "Retired teacher. I love coastal walks and quiet guests." Emily checked in on a Thursday. She was due to leave Sunday morning. She never made it to check out. The drive from Portland took her 3 hours. She stopped twice, once for gas, once for a sandwich from a roadside diner. Both receipts later became part of the timeline. Traffic cameras confirmed her arrival. Silver Subaru rental, 4:56 p.m. She parked facing the sea, sent her sister a photo captioned, "I think this is the view I've been chasing all year." That was the last message she ever sent. The cottage was small but warm. 1 bedroom, a living room with salt-stained windows and the faint smell of pine cleaner. A Ring doorbell camera was mounted on the porch, one of those newer models with night vision and cloud storage. Guests rarely noticed it. But Lydia always checked her feed after each booking, just to be sure no one sneaks in extra guests, she told police later. When Emily arrived, Lydia's phone lit up with a motion alert. A woman with chestnut hair stepped onto the porch, suitcase in hand, smiling faintly. She waved at the camera without knowing she was waving to her own evidence. For the next day and a half, Emily lived like someone learning how to breathe again. She woke early, walked barefoot along the beach, bought groceries from a local market. At 7:12 p.m. Friday, she paid for a bottle of Merlot, fresh salmon, and candles. The clerk remembered her because she joked about the rain never stopping. That same night, a neighbor walking his dog saw her through the window, music playing, her silhouette moving softly around the kitchen. He would later tell police she looked happy, alone, but not lonely. At 9:03 p.m., Lydia received another Ring alert. It was Emily again, stepping onto the porch to photograph the sunset. The video lasted 11 seconds. In it, her hair blew across her face. She turned once, looking toward the camera, then back toward the cliffs. That clip would later air on every news channel in Oregon. The last clear image of her alive. There were small details that didn't fit from the beginning. Tiny fractures in an otherwise ordinary weekend. At 10:41 p.m., Emily's phone connected to a new Wi-Fi network labeled Guest House Dark Ext, but Lydia's router log didn't show any extension. There was only one network registered under her name. At 11:09, Emily opened a rideshare app. She never requested a car, and at 11:17 a new device appeared on the Ring network. It disconnected 30 seconds later. All of it, at the time, looked like harmless noise. Only later would investigators realize it was a trail. The next morning, a storm rolled in from the sea. Winds lashed the coastline, and the air turned heavy with salt. Emily texted her sister once more. "Rain's insane here, but I kinda love it." Her sister replied, "Stay dry. Call me Sunday." Emily reacted with a heart emoji. The timestamp was Saturday, 6 a.m. That would be the last sign of her phone's activity. Neighbors recalled hearing faint music later that afternoon, something low and rhythmic, maybe jazz. Then around dusk, silence. The storm passed just before midnight, leaving the cottage drenched but intact. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. Inside, the scene would later puzzle investigators. The door was unlocked. The lights were on. Dinner had been started but not finished. Her phone charger sat coiled beside the couch. Only two things were missing: her phone and her passport. Her car remained in the driveway. By Sunday afternoon, Lydia grew uneasy. Emily hadn't checked out or responded to messages. When Lydia arrived at the cottage, she called through the screen door. No answer. Inside, she noticed the faint smell of burnt wax, the candle from Friday night still half melted on the table. The sheets were tangled, but the bed wasn't slept in. The window above the sink stood open, rainwater dripping onto the counter. When she walked onto the porch, the Ring camera's lens was cracked. The light still blinked faintly, trying to connect. That was the first clue. Lydia contacted the police at 4:18 p.m. By evening, a search team combed the cliffs. Officers found no footprints leading down to the beach, no signs of a fall. One officer noted something odd in his report. The sand beneath the deck was freshly disturbed, like someone had dragged a heavy bag or object away from the stairs. But the rain had washed most of it clean. Investigators began piecing together her movements. Phone records placed her last signal at 11:08 p.m. Friday, inside the Airbnb. After that, silence. Her banking app showed no new charges. Her digital wallet hadn't been used. The only network activity came from the Ring camera system itself, which logged a brief connection from an unknown IP address late Saturday night. That connection came from Los Angeles. Detectives contacted Ring's headquarters to retrieve backup footage. They discovered that someone had accessed the homeowner's account using Lydia's credentials. The access originated from a device not belonging to her, an Android phone registered under a fake name, Evan Chase. When they pulled the security log, they found one final clip that hadn't been deleted. It showed the porch at night, a flicker of movement, then a shape stepping forward, hooded, reflective jacket glinting. The figure reached toward the lens. Frame cut. But there was one other thing. Something so small it was almost missed. A brief reflection in the glass door beside the camera. Not of the intruder, of Emily, standing inside, watching, her expression unreadable. Was she afraid? Was she complicit? Or was she just frozen in that one impossible second between knowing and vanishing? No one could say. By Sunday night, the coast was crawling with police. Search dogs traced her scent as far as the gravel driveway before losing it completely. Detectives interviewed nearby residents. One couple mentioned a silver truck parked near the trailhead that same night. Engine running. Lights off. No one got the license plate. When news of the missing woman hit social media, Lydia became an unwilling figure in the story. Reporters camped outside her home. Commenters dissected her every word. One online thread accused her of staging the scene for insurance fraud. Another suggested the property was part of a trafficking ring. Lydia stayed quiet. But privately, she told police she recognized the reflection in that video. Not Emily, someone else, a man she'd rented to once. Years earlier, a guest who'd left a review calling her place too isolated, perfect for quiet work. When investigators asked for his name, she hesitated, then said it, Evan Chase. The coincidence was too sharp to ignore. The same alias that accessed the Ring account now appeared in the host's old booking records. When detectives cross-checked his profile, they found it linked to multiple short-term rentals across 3 states, all under different names but one identical pattern. Each booking followed the same route. Oregon, California, Nevada. Each rental reported minor vandalism, Small disturbances, Wi-Fi interference. None had security footage left intact until now. The next morning, a digital forensics team arrived. They retrieved fragments of the corrupted ring data and decrypted what was left. Seconds of night vision. The porch, the shadow. But buried in the file's metadata was a GPS coordinate attached to the device that had accessed it remotely. Los Angeles, downtown, a motel off Olympic Boulevard. It was enough for a warrant. And that's where the clock started ticking. 72 hours. From a coastal cottage to a city motel, from silence to signal. A search team boarded a plane that night. In the air, one detective stared out at the dark clouds below and whispered almost to himself. If the ring camera saw him, it might have seen her too. The Vanishing had just become a manhunt, and the one piece of technology built to make people feel safe was about to show what safety actually costs. The last confirmed image of Emily Hart was recorded at 9:03 p.m. on Friday. She was barefoot, standing on the wooden porch of the Airbnb wrapped in a gray cardigan. Her hair moved in the wind, the ocean behind her a dull silver line under the fading sky. She looked calm, maybe too calm. From that moment forward, everything that happened, every sound, every shadow, would be replayed frame by detectives trying to answer one question. When did the night stop being safe? After that brief sunset clip, the world outside her cottage fell silent. The storm clouds were gathering farther up the coast, slow and heavy. Inside, Emily lit a candle, opened her laptop, and played music from an offline playlist. The Wi-Fi flickered twice, then stabilized. She poured wine into a single glass, sat on the rug, and began editing photos from her walk earlier. At 9:47, she messaged a coworker. Need to unplug for a bit. We'll answer Monday. Her tone was ordinary, measured. Then, nothing. At 10:04 p.m., the Ring camera captured its first unusual motion. A faint figure moved beyond the porch light, just outside the frame near the edge of the stairs. It could have been wind or mist or an animal, but a human shape lingered for 3 seconds longer than any wind should. The alert pinged Lydia's phone miles away. She silenced it, assuming it was just the storm. That single choice delayed the discovery by nearly a day. Emily noticed something around that time. According to later analysis of her phone data, the screen lit up twice, once when she received a notification from her banking app, and once when the brightness manually increased as though she was holding it close. She opened her camera app, took a photo, then deleted it. When digital forensics recovered the image from her cloud backup, it showed only darkness and the faint reflection of her own face in the kitchen window. But behind her shoulder, blurred and indistinct, was a second shape. No one could say for sure what it was. But it was there. At 10:21, the Wi-Fi network Guesthouse X appeared. Signal strong, unsecured, her phone automatically connected. It was likely a hotspot from a nearby device, a phone or a portable router. Within minutes, her location services froze. No new GPS data. Like a digital blackout, the wind picked up outside. The rain began to fall in cold, slanted sheets. Emily moved to the bedroom. She closed the window, lit another candle, and began journaling on her tablet. Her notes, later recovered, were mundane at first. The air smells like pine. The sea sounds alive. Then one final line before the text abruptly stopped mid-sentence. Someone is... The screen went black. The next sequence of events was reconstructed almost entirely through sound. The Ring camera, though its lens would later crack, kept recording audio for several minutes after the visual feed went dark. At 11:03 p.m., faint footsteps approached the porch. Not hurried, deliberate. Wood creaking, weight shifting. Then, the door handle. A soft click. Another. The sound of metal meeting resistance. Inside, her phone locked automatically, its light fading from the counter. The camera caught one final phrase, barely audible, but forensic software enhanced it enough to recognize 2 words. Emily's voice whispering, "Who's there?" Then the glass of the door shook slightly. Something or someone was testing it. At 11:06, there was motion again. This time, the camera's night vision clicked on. A figure appeared, hooded, tall, face obscured. He stepped onto the porch and leaned toward the lens. For 2 seconds, his face illuminated by the infrared light. Pale skin, stubble, a scar near the right eye. Then his hand reached forward and the screen went black. The video ended at 11:06:23 p.m. Inside, there were no signs of a struggle. But investigators later found a single overturned glass, its base fractured. The candle on the kitchen counter had been snuffed out, leaving wax pooled like spilled milk. At 11:08, her phone disconnected from the network. 2 minutes later, the Bluetooth connection to her wireless earbuds dropped. The last trace of her personal devices. Neighbors didn't hear screams, but one recalled a sound that stood out. A car engine idling for nearly 10 minutes, then shutting off. Another reported seeing a faint light moving through the trees, too high to be a flashlight, too steady to be random. A drone, maybe. Police never confirmed that. At 11:24 p.m., a second Ring device nearby, belonging to a neighbor 2 houses down, picked up a blurred car tail light exiting the dirt road. The license plate was unreadable due to rain, but the make and model matched a vehicle rented under a different name 2 days earlier. A gray Ford Ranger. That rental had been logged to a credit card belonging to Evan Chase. From 11:30 until after midnight, the cottage remained still. The front door stayed unlocked. The music playlist on her laptop continued for 21 minutes before looping to silence. When Lydia arrived the next afternoon, it was still playing on mute, the speakers humming faintly. In the static, a faint digital pulse could be heard, the echo of an unfinished track, looping endlessly. Meanwhile, 900 miles south, a cell phone registered as belonging to the same Evan Chase pinged a signal tower outside Los Angeles. At 3:17 a.m., it connected to a motel Wi-Fi network under a different alias, Guest 202. Minutes later, Lydia's Ring account logged a new login attempt from the same IP address. The pattern was perfect. Too perfect. He'd done this before. But there was one thing he didn't anticipate. When he disconnected the Ring camera, he assumed it was dead. He didn't know that newer models like Lydia's had a local buffer that stored footage even without Wi-Fi, uploading it automatically once power returned. When Lydia turned on the porch light the next morning, that 7-second file sent itself to the cloud. And inside it was everything. Investigators would later analyze those seconds 100 times. The hooded figure, the faint reflection in the glass, Emily's face lit by candlelight. But there was more. When the screen went black, 2 frames lingered, too quick for the naked eye. Forensic technicians enhanced them. In the faint infrared, the camera had caught a partial tattoo on the intruder's wrist, a black outline, a compass, the same tattoo visible on Evan Chase's old social media photos. The footage was incomplete, but enough to issue a warrant. And yet, even as they built the case, a question hung in the air. What happened between 11:06 and 11:17? Because in those 11 minutes, something else occurred. Her phone connected briefly to an unknown Bluetooth signal, one not belonging to her devices. The name read simply, Pairing 1. Forensic teams later determined it was a wireless camera feed, meaning whoever was there wasn't recording her for the first time. He was broadcasting. The next morning, while search teams swept the cliffs, the ocean returned its own evidence. A small plastic wristband, like those from airport luggage tags, washed ashore 3 miles south. Printed on it, LAX or Terminal 3. Her family hadn't known she had plans to fly anywhere. But one flight had departed Portland early Saturday morning, with a ticket issued under her name. The face at check-in didn't match. By then, Emily was already gone. It would take 2 days before police linked the fake boarding pass to the footage from the Airbnb. By then, the same Ring camera that captured the beginning had also triggered the first alert of the end. When Lydia received that notification, new device connected to your account, she didn't know it wasn't hers. She clicked the link, opening the live feed, expecting to see her own porch. Instead, she saw a dim motel hallway, a door, and for half a second, a reflection in the peephole, familiar eyes staring back into the lens. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the phone. That's when she called the police again. Within hours, detectives traced the IP to a budget motel outside Los Angeles. The system log confirmed it, same account, same device ID. And when they reviewed that motel's external security footage, they saw a man leaving room 14 at 3:28 a.m. He was carrying a duffel bag and a black object that looked like a camera. He turned once, toward the camera before walking out of frame. His face matched the reflection on Lydia's porch camera, the scar near the right eye, the same outline of the compass tattoo. It was him. But what they didn't expect, what no one could have prepared for, was what they found inside that motel room. Because inside, propped up against the bed, was the same Ring camera from the Airbnb, still blinking, still recording, and in the saved video folder, one new file. Timestamp 11:17 p.m. The night Emily vanished. Duration 11. That was the missing footage. And it was about to show what really happened. The file took nearly 10 minutes to decrypt. When the playback began, the room at police headquarters fell still. Officers leaned close to the monitor, their faces reflected in the glow of the paused frame. Timestamp 11:17:04 p.m. Location: Coastal Airbnb, Oregon. The footage opened in darkness. Then a light flickered just for an instant. A man's silhouette stood near the door. His jacket glistened with rain. He turned slightly, revealing the edge of a compass tattoo. In the corner behind him was the faint outline of Emily Hart, alive, standing near the table. She was holding something. A phone? A candle? No one could tell. The recording lasted 11 seconds. At the 6th second, she moved toward him. At the 10th, the camera tilted as if knocked sideways. Then black, no sound, no scream, only the creak of wood and a gust of wind. Detective Carson Lee was the first to speak. 11 seconds, he said quietly. And it's enough. The file was sent to the Digital Forensics Bureau in Salem for enhancement. Every pixel, every ambient noise analyzed. Within hours, they discovered something no one expected. Under the wind, barely audible, was a second voice. A whisper. Male. 4 words. Don't make a sound. That confirmed it. Emily hadn't vanished by accident. Someone had taken her. By Monday morning, the case had moved from a missing person to a multi-state abduction. Lydia Reeve, the Airbnb host, sat in a small interview room, her hands folded tightly around a paper cup of coffee. Her voice trembled, not from guilt but from something deeper. Shock at how a space meant for peace had become a crime scene. I've rented that place for 6 years, she said. No one's ever disappeared before. Detectives asked about the previous guest, the one who'd used the alias Evan Chase. She nodded. Quiet man. Stayed 3 nights. Said he was writing a book. Left behind a charger and a note that said, "Thanks for the silence." They traced the name through Airbnb's internal records. Fake. Linked to a prepaid card purchased in Nevada. But the account's IP address matched the login that had accessed Lydia's Ring account. The walls were closing in. In Los Angeles, the motel where the camera was recovered became the second crime scene. Room 14 was stripped bare, bed, nightstand, Ring camera blinking beside an ashtray. But forensic techs found traces, a single strand of hair, a cigarette filter, and partial fingerprints on the camera's rear casing. The hair was Emily's. The prints matched a man named Evan Miller, 42, a freelance sound technician with prior arrests for stalking and illegal surveillance. He'd worked briefly in home security installations. He knew cameras. He knew how to hide, and most importantly, he knew how to erase. Detectives reconstructed his movements. Wednesday, Miller rented a gray Ford Ranger in Portland. Thursday, he booked a motel 30 miles inland. Friday, he drove to Cannon Beach within 2 miles of Emily's Airbnb. Saturday, he drove south, likely transporting her. Sunday, he checked into the Los Angeles motel. That timeline fit perfectly with the signal data. When officers raided the motel's dumpster, they found a black duffel bag. Inside, rope fibers, a portable Wi-Fi router labeled Guest House X'd, and a second phone with its SIM card removed. The screen was cracked but not destroyed. When powered on, it opened to a folder titled Cloudback. Inside were 27 video files, each named after a city. The most recent Canon 1117. Detective Lee opened it with gloves on. The first frame froze everyone in the room. It showed the Airbnb living room. Emily on the floor, sitting upright, unharmed but silent. Her hands tied loosely in front of her with what looked like fabric. Miller, visible in the reflection of the TV, was adjusting the Ring camera on the table. He spoke softly, like he was directing a scene. "Say your name for the record." Emily's voice was steady. "Emily Hart." Then the footage cut. The room went quiet. The silence wasn't just horror. It was disbelief at the intimacy of what they were seeing. He wasn't improvising. He'd done this before. Every video in that folder showed a different rental home, a different woman, each framed the same way, still, calm, speaking her name. He had built his own archive, but the difference this time was the Ring device. It hadn't just recorded, it had remembered. At dawn, a joint task force formed. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit joined Oregon State Police. Agents mapped his prior movements across 6 states. Each address corresponded to short-term rentals listed under fake names. He was a drifter of the digital age, someone who lived in the margins between the real and the recorded. Forensic psychologist Dr. Nina Alcott summarized it best. He wasn't just filming them. He was rehearsing control. Every video was practice for the next. Meanwhile, in Denver, Emily's family gathered at her apartment. Her mother, Rachel, sat at the kitchen table with the blinds closed, the phone pressed to her chest. Reporters were already outside. She refused to speak to them. When the call came from Detective Lee, her voice broke for the first time in days. "Is she alive?" Lee hesitated. "We don't know. But we're close," that was the truth. They were closer than anyone expected. Back in Los Angeles, the forensics lab extracted GPS data from Miller's second phone. It showed one final location ping after the motel, Griffith Park, or 6 a.m. Sunday. Beyond that, no signal. Police deployed drones over the hills, searching for the Ford Ranger. Nothing, but an officer scanning through traffic cameras on the 101 freeway caught something unusual. At 3:22 a.m., a gray pickup passed under a toll camera. In the passenger seat, barely visible, was a woman with her head resting against the window. The timestamp matched the motel footage. The license plate was partially obscured, but the last 3 digits, 7C1, matched the rental records. She was alive. At least then, the search intensified. Officers canvassed parking lots, gas stations, and highway exits. By Monday night, a park ranger called in a lead, a truck matching the description found near a trailhead west of Griffith Park. The driver's door was open. Inside, the seats were dry, but the ground beneath was soaked with recent rain. In the bed of the truck, they found the duffel bag's missing strap and a hotel keycard from room 14. The area was sealed off. Forensics moved in. Just after dawn, a drone operator scanning the canyon spotted a patch of disturbed soil near an abandoned picnic site. Officers hiked to the location. What they found there didn't fit the pattern at all. A blue tarp, a backpack, and underneath not a body but Emily's passport, phone and car keys, all arranged neatly, as if placed there intentionally. Nearby, a single footprint led toward the trail, then stopped. She had escaped. It took another 12 hours to confirm. A homeless man living near the park entrance reported seeing a disoriented woman early Sunday morning asking for help. She'd been barefoot, soaked, carrying nothing but a torn jacket. He said she gave him $20 and asked to use his phone. She made one call that lasted less than 30 seconds. Records later showed that call went to 911, but the connection dropped before dispatch could trace it. The system logged her words. "Help me. He's still..." Then silence. That discovery reignited the search. Teams combed every inch of the park for 2 days. Dogs tracked her scent along the trail, then lost it near a service road. But at the end of that road, near an old maintenance tunnel, officers found something else. A discarded camera tripod and a wet sleeping bag. The ground nearby was littered with small, square batteries. Each one labeled Ring. He'd brought multiple cameras. By now, every second counted. 72 hours had passed since the first alert. Detective Lee hadn't slept. He sat at his desk surrounded by screens showing fragments of data, Ring clips, GPS logs, rental records. Somewhere in that chaos, Emily was alive, waiting for someone to connect the dots. Then at 3:14 a.m., a new motion alert appeared on Lydia's phone. Same account, same camera ID. But the footage wasn't from the cottage or the motel. It showed an underground tunnel dimly lit, water dripping from pipes, and in the corner, a woman's shadow moved, slow, cautious, breathing hard. "Playback now," Lee ordered. The video stuttered, pixelated, then cleared. Emily was crawling through the tunnel, the camera strapped to her wrist. She turned it toward her face, eyes wide. Dirt on her cheeks, she whispered, "If someone finds this, I got away." "He's not far." Then she looked over her shoulder. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her. She ran. The footage ended abruptly, but that final clip contained metadata, a GPS coordinate. The same canyon where the park rangers were searching. An hour later, search teams converged on the location. And at 5:42 a.m., deep inside the maintenance tunnel, they found her, alive, exhausted, wrapped in a stolen jacket. She had hidden for nearly 30 hours in the dark, surviving on rainwater. Her first words to Detective Lee were barely audible. He recorded everything. Emily was taken to Cedars-Sinai Hospital under protective custody. When officers swept the tunnel, they found Miller unconscious in a side chamber, overdosed on pills from his motel bag. Next to him was a laptop open to a folder labeled Final Cut. Inside were the same videos. Dozens of names, dozens of homes, but only one file remained unfinished. Canon 11:17. It ended mid-edit, time-stamped exactly 11:17 p.m., the night she disappeared. The tunnel air was cold and metallic. When investigators sealed off the site where Emily was found, her fingerprints were already on the camera, the wall, the pipe, proof she had crawled through darkness to save herself. But what no one yet understood was why the footage existed at all. Because when the FBI opened the final folder on Evan Miller's laptop, they found something stranger than any confession. Each subfolder contained fragments of Ring camera firmware, scripts, code modifications, and notes written in his hand. He hadn't just stolen devices. He'd been rewiring them. He was building his own network. Every Ring, every smart camera he'd ever handled connected to a hidden relay. It allowed him to access the feeds remotely, long after guests left, long after hosts stopped checking. Dozens of Airbnbs, hotels, and rentals were part of it. Miller had turned the illusion of safety into his hunting ground. What began as voyeurism evolved into orchestration. He was directing moments, framing his victims as if they were characters in an unfinished film, and Emily wasn't the first woman he'd chosen for the final act, but she was the only one who refused to follow the script. Detectives reconstructed his process from the data he left behind. He would rent a property under a new alias, install his modified Ring camera, and leave it connected to his hidden network. Weeks later, when new guests arrived, he'd log in remotely, watching, recording, sometimes interacting through the speakers, testing reactions. In most cases, his victims never noticed. A flicker of light, a strange chime, easy to dismiss, but with Emily, he made a mistake. The code he used to clone Lydia's Wi-Fi left a visible trace, the phantom network. Guesthouse X, that was how investigators proved the break-in had started hours before he appeared in person. He had been inside her devices first. When they questioned him in custody, Miller's eyes were half open, his voice quiet from sedation. He barely spoke, only muttering short fragments. "She was awake," he said once. "She knew it wasn't about her." What did he mean? At first, no one understood. Then the forensics team found something in the Ring system's cloud storage. Metadata labeled Session 0. It wasn't video. It was a live feed log, showing connection attempts from multiple users, other viewers. There were IPs from California, Florida, even overseas. Whoever Miller was, he wasn't alone. The revelation shifted the case overnight. The FBI reclassified it as interstate digital trafficking, a network trading live surveillance feeds of women staying in private rentals. Each camera, each modified firmware, was a portal. The footage had been sold on encrypted forums disguised as art streams, cinematic voyeurism marketed as experimental cinema. Viewers thought they were watching fiction. They weren't. The last recorded broadcast, Canon 11:17, had gone live the night Emily vanished. Hundreds of people had seen it before the feed cut to black. When Emily was told, she didn't cry. She stared at the table, silent for a long time. Then she whispered, "That's why he said it wasn't about me." Her escape hadn't been part of his plan. She had broken the illusion, and by doing so, she had exposed everyone watching. Detectives began retracing the data chain. Every subscriber, every digital payment, every login. One by one, they mapped the coordinates, uncovering a pattern. A series of homes across the Pacific coast, all wired with the same modified cameras. Each property listed under the same management company, Stillwave Rentals. LLC. The name sounded harmless, even poetic. But the company didn't exist. Its listed office address was a shipping container lot outside Sacramento. Inside one of those containers, agents found a server rack humming softly. Rows of drives labeled with names and dates, among them, Heart Trial A. The files recovered there were unlike anything they'd seen. Hundreds of small clips, each showing women performing everyday tasks, brushing hair, cooking, reading. None aware they were being filmed. Every file had a soundtrack, low ambient tones, sometimes overlapping with Miller's voice giving quiet direction. It was art in his mind. He had been producing what he called the Unaware series, and each camera was his brushstroke. Back in Los Angeles, Emily's interviews grew longer, more detailed. She recalled the night frame by frame, the door rattling, the man stepping inside, the smell of rain and cigarettes. He told her to sit, tied her hands loosely, not like someone restraining, but like someone framing an image. He asked her to say her name. She refused. Then he said, "You'll ruin it if you move," and started adjusting the camera. She waited until he turned his back. That's when she grabbed the lens and hit him. The blow cracked the casing, the same fracture seen in the recovered ring. That damage, she realized later, was what saved her. It triggered the backup buffer that stored the footage he thought he'd deleted. In breaking the lens, she preserved her own evidence. Forensic engineers confirmed it. When a ring device is physically damaged during recording, the internal chip duplicates the data for crash recovery. That's why the file survived. That's why the case broke open in 72 hours. It wasn't the camera that solved the mystery. It was the flaw he never accounted for: human resistance. Investigators followed the digital trail to 3 more properties. Each one wired the same way. Each one holding residual footage of other victims. One of them had been missing for 2 years. Another had filed a complaint about hearing voices through the camera. Both cases had been dismissed as technical malfunctions. Now, those same devices became silent witnesses. By Thursday night, a federal task force raided a warehouse in Nevada registered to Stillwave Rentals. They expected empty storage. Instead, they found a sound stage, cameras mounted on walls, fake Airbnb interiors built like film sets, beach cabins, mountain lodges, city lofts, all wired into the same network, and on one wall, a corkboard covered in printed stills from the footage, each labeled with dates, timestamps, and the word performance. At the center was Emily's photo. Under it, in neat handwriting, "The one who noticed." The twist was complete. What had started as a missing person search now revealed a vast underground network, masquerading as home-sharing properties. Miller wasn't the architect, just the lens. There were others, investors, anonymous viewers funding the system, but they hadn't planned on the Ring camera glitching, and they hadn't planned on her surviving. When the agents returned to Emily's hospital room, they told her what they'd found. She listened without moving, staring at the glow of the bedside monitor. Finally, she said, "I think he wanted me to see what he saw." Detective Lee asked, "And what was that?" She looked up slowly. The moment someone realizes they're being watched, that's what he was collecting. For days, investigators sifted through every recovered drive. The deeper they went, the clearer the pattern became. Each file ended the same way, with the subject looking directly at the camera as if suddenly aware. That expression, fear, confusion, realization, was his obsession. He wasn't chasing people. He was chasing that look, and he'd orchestrated entire weekends just to capture it. At the Department of Justice press conference, officials called it the most complex digital voyeurism case in U.S. history. Over 30 victims identified, 12 properties compromised, and a half-dozen suspects connected through encrypted wallets, but only one survivor had turned the camera back on them. Emily gave a statement months later. Her voice was steady, uninflected. "I didn't run because I wanted to live," she said. "I ran because I wanted him to remember what being watched feels like." She had taken his tool of control, the Ring, and used it to expose him. Her escape footage became part of the evidence that dismantled the network. And in an ironic twist, that same clip, the one of her whispering in the tunnel, would be played on screens across the world. But this time, she chose to be seen. When Detective Lee watched it again, alone in his office, he paused on one frame, the instant she turned the camera toward her face, defiant, exhausted, unbroken. For him, that was the true ending, not the arrest, not the server farm, but a single human gaze reclaiming the lens, the hunted becoming the witness. Morning over the Oregon coast arrives in silence. The same porch that once shimmered under a trembling security light now stands empty. Wind brushes across the cracked Ring camera lens. It blinks once, searching for a network that no longer exists. 3 months have passed since Emily Hart walked out of the darkness. And yet, in some ways, she is still inside it. The investigation expanded far beyond her story. Across the Pacific states, law enforcement raided dozens of rental properties linked to Stillwave Rentals. Each location held echoes of the same blueprint: modified cameras, cloned Wi-Fi routers, hidden storage caches. What began as a single vanishing evolved into a national case. The network of silence, the headlines called it. 32 confirmed victims. 10 still unaccounted for. Hundreds of hours of footage seized. But amid the noise, the press conferences, the court filings, the interviews, one quiet fact remained. It had all been uncovered because one woman refused to be erased. In Los Angeles, Evan Miller never stood trial. His overdose left him in a coma for 2 weeks before his heart failed. He died without confession, leaving his digital architecture intact but fragmented. Even so, his death didn't end the case. It complicated it. Prosecutors pursued the others, the hidden investors, the system's silent architects. Each arrest came with another revelation. The network wasn't about money. It was about control. Dozens of subscribers had joined encrypted chat rooms, exchanging footage as study material for behavior and art. In their messages, they called Miller the director. They discussed casting and framing. None of them had lifted a hand against anyone. They simply watched. Emily was called to testify in the first trial. She arrived in a gray coat, hair pinned back, eyes steady. Her testimony lasted 4 hours. Prosecutors expected tears. There were none. Instead, she described it like a rehearsal gone wrong, a performance she refused to finish. "He wanted me to react," she said softly. "I didn't. That's what ruined his story." The courtroom was silent. Even the defense attorney lowered his gaze. Outside, the world reacted in waves. Airbnb issued new security guidelines. Mandatory camera disclosures, firmware verifications, digital network scanning. Ring announced firmware updates to prevent unauthorized data loops. Tech journalists debated ethics. True crime channels flooded the internet with theories. But the core of the story, the quiet terror of being seen, wasn't something technology could patch. Back in Oregon, Lydia Reeves sold the property. She told reporters she couldn't bear to walk past that porch again. It was supposed to be a place of rest, she said. Now it just listens to ghosts. For weeks, tourists still came, standing by the fence, taking photos of the cottage that solved a mystery. They didn't see the loneliness behind the windows or the salt stains that never faded. They just saw a story that fit into a headline. Emily returned to Denver and disappeared from public view. Her family said she spent most days hiking in the mountains, rarely checking her phone, but she did keep one thing from that night: the cracked Ring camera. She had it cleaned, sealed, and placed on a shelf near her desk. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Sometimes, when she couldn't sleep, she'd turn the lens toward the window, letting it stare out into the night. It no longer connected to anything. It only reflected. 6 months later, she began speaking again. Small interviews for advocacy groups, digital privacy panels. Her voice remained soft, deliberate. "People think what saved me was the footage," she told one journalist. "It wasn't. What saved me was noticing, paying attention to what didn't feel right." Her message wasn't about fear, it was about awareness. She never used the word evil, she used control, because that, she said, was what he wanted most. Meanwhile, investigators continued to untangle the network. Some leads led overseas, others vanished into the web's dark corners, encrypted and unreachable. But each trace exposed more of how ordinary technology could be weaponized, how a simple home device could become a window into someone's most private moments. One federal report summarized it in a single line: "Security creates comfort. Comfort breeds blindness." It wasn't just about cameras. It was about trust. Detective Carson Lee took early retirement 2 months after the final case closed. When reporters asked why, he said, "You can't stare into that much quiet horror and still hear yourself think." But before leaving, he mailed Emily something, a printed still from her tunnel footage. He wrote on the back, "You turned the camera around." She framed it. Not because she wanted to remember him, but because she needed to remember that moment. The second she stopped being a subject and became the witness, the ripple didn't end there. Congress held hearings about privacy and short-term rentals. Tech companies scrambled to audit devices. For a brief moment, the public became aware of how much of their lives passed through invisible eyes. Then, as always, the noise faded. New stories took over. The ocean kept moving. But for those who'd seen the footage, the original investigators, the families of the victims, something lingered. A quiet dread, not of violence but of presence. That sense that once you've been seen through a lens, part of you never fully returns. One evening, nearly a year later, Lydia returned to the coast for the first time. She parked near the old cottage, now painted white, windows replaced, ring camera gone. But in the porch light's reflection, she thought she saw movement, just a trick of the glass, maybe her own face. She smiled sadly, then turned away. When she reached her car, her phone vibrated once. A push notification from a new home security app she'd installed for peace of mind. No motion detected. She stared at the screen, then silenced it. Some silence, she thought, doesn't need confirmation. In Denver, Emily began writing again. Her first essay, published anonymously, opened with a single line. "I used to think cameras captured truth. Now I know they only reveal what someone wants to see." She didn't describe the tunnel or the fear. She wrote about control, about narrative, about how easy it is to lose yourself in someone else's story. The essay spread quietly, shared not for its details, but for its tone, measured, reflective, human. Readers didn't need to know her name to understand it came from a survivor. By the anniversary of her rescue, the cottage stood empty again. Grass grew wild around the porch steps. Locals said the place felt lighter now, as if the sea had washed away the last echoes. But late at night, fishermen out on the water claimed they sometimes saw a faint glow from the hill. A single blinking light, like a camera trying to reconnect. Maybe it was just reflection, or maybe somewhere inside the cloud archives that never truly delete. The Ring was still searching for a signal, trying to finish the upload it started that night. In the end, the story that began with a single flicker of motion became something larger. A mirror held up to a world that records everything, but remembers nothing. And for Emily Hart, the question wasn't how she survived. It was what she carried forward, a scar she didn't hide, a silence she didn't fill, a camera she didn't throw away, because in that broken lens she saw both sides of the same truth, how we watch and how we are watched. When asked once if she still believed in technology, she smiled faintly. "Technology didn't hurt me," she said. "People did. The camera just told the truth too late." Then she stood, turned off the light, and for the first time in a long while, let the darkness be only darkness.